Here's a number that should stop you cold. In 2000, the European Union accounted for roughly 26% of global GDP. Today, that number has fallen to around 17%. In just 2 decades, Europe's share of the world economy has collapsed by nearly a third. And the most uncomfortable part, Europe didn't get hit by some external disaster. No asteroid, no invasion, no black swan nobody saw coming. Europe largely did this to itself, slowly, systematically, and with the best of intentions. This is the story of how one of the most educated, sophisticated, and resource-rich regions on the planet engineered its own economic decline, and why almost nobody in power wants to say it out loud. The energy catastrophe. Let's start with energy because this is where the unraveling becomes impossible to ignore. For decades, Europe built its industrial competitiveness on one foundation: cheap Russian natural gas. German manufacturers, French chemical companies, Italian factories, they all ran on affordable energy that kept production costs low and exports competitive. At its peak, Russia was supplying roughly 40% of Europe's total natural gas consumption. Then came February 2022. Russia invaded Ukraine. Europe rightly condemned it. Sanctions followed, and Europe made the decision to wean itself off Russian energy fast. The consequences were immediate and brutal. European natural gas prices in 2022 spiked to levels nearly 10 times higher than their historical averages. Electricity prices exploded. Energy-intensive industries, steel, aluminum, chemicals, fertilizers, faced input costs that made production economically unviable. BASF, one of the world's largest chemical companies headquartered in Germany, announced it was permanently shrinking its European operations and shifting investment to China and the United States. That wasn't a temporary adjustment. That was a strategic retreat. Germany, Europe's largest economy, contracted in both 2023 and 2024. The country that was once called the engine of Europe is now being called the sick man of Europe. Industrial output is falling, investment is leaving, and the energy prices that triggered it all remain structurally elevated compared to pre-2022 levels. The regulation trap, but energy alone doesn't explain everything. The deeper problem is structural, and it has been building for years. Europe has developed one of the most complex regulatory environments in the world. Now, regulation isn't inherently bad. Consumer protections, environmental standards, labor rights, these are legitimate goals, but at some point, the cumulative weight of regulation becomes a tax on economic activity itself. Mario Draghi, former president of the European Central Bank, former prime minister of Italy, and one of the most respected economic minds in Europe, delivered a landmark report to the European Commission in September 2024. His conclusion was stark. Europe faces an existential competitiveness challenge. He called for up to 800 billion euros in additional annual investment just to close the gap with the United States and China, and he specifically cited excessive regulation, fragmented capital markets, and bureaucratic complexity as core obstacles strangling European growth. This wasn't a fringe opinion. This was the establishment talking to itself, finally admitting the problem out loud. The innovation gap. Here's where it gets genuinely alarming. Of the top 50 technology companies in the world by market capitalization, Europe has essentially zero, not a few, zero meaningful representation at the frontier of the digital economy. The United States has Apple, Microsoft, Nvidia, Alphabet, Amazon, Meta. China has Alibaba, Tencent, Huawei. Europe has what exactly? SAP is the one name people reach for, a German enterprise software company founded in 1972. Why? Because building a high-growth technology startup in Europe is genuinely harder. Capital markets are fragmented across 27 different national systems. A startup in Berlin can't access capital as fluidly as one in San Francisco. Listing a company publicly in Europe involves navigating a maze of different national regulations, and the cultural attitude toward failure, which is the oxygen that venture-backed innovation requires, is fundamentally more risk-averse than in the United States. The result? Europe's best entrepreneurs increasingly move to the US or the UK to build their companies. Europe produces the talent and exports it. The demographic time bomb. Underneath all of this is a demographic reality that no policy can quickly fix. Europe is aging rapidly. Germany's median age is around 46. Italy's is nearly 48. These are among the oldest populations of any major economy on Earth. An aging population means fewer workers supporting more retirees, rising pension and healthcare costs, and structurally lower economic dynamism. Japan went through this first, and Japan's experience offers a preview. Decades of sluggish growth, deflationary pressure, and a shrinking domestic consumer base. Europe is walking the same path with the added complexity of political tensions around immigration that make demographic replenishment through migration politically explosive. The competitiveness cliff. Put it all together, structurally high energy costs, regulatory overload, and innovation desert at the technology frontier, aging demographics.